Middleweight sports bikes are back, but didn't we all stop riding sports bikes on the road? So is there any point anymore? In the beginning there was light, and sometime after that motorbikes were invented, and that was a very, very good day. When motorbikes were invented, they were just motorbikes, like this. They did motorbike things. If you wanted to go touring, you bought some touring bits and bolted them on. If you wanted to go off-road, you cut things off and put knobbly tyres on. But motorbikes were pretty much motorbikes. And then as the years rolled on, things got more and more specialised until you ended up with all manner of very specialist equipment, like full-blown trials bikes, sports bikes, touring bikes. You picked what bit of motorbiking you wanted to do, and you bought a bike to do that job. And that was a long time that it was like that. And in the background, adventure bikes and trail bikes, as they were called back then, they always existed, but they were never that good. And then one day, someone in adventure bike world went, let's make them good. Let's make them not boring old duffers. And that brings us to modern adventure bikes, which are irritatingly good at stuff. They can do track days, they can do off-road competition events, they can go absolutely banzai fast on the road and cover ground quicker than anything else, and then they can take you on holiday to the south of Europe, thousands of miles away, and back again in comfort with a passenger and luggage. And when that happened, we all sort of forgot about this stuff. As a market, motorcycling jumped on these things, and a lot of other areas of the motorcycling world started to fizzle out. One of the big victims was middleweight sports bikes. The Super Sport 600 class that we all grew up absolutely loving died, and then manufacturers stopped making those bikes, and then we moaned. We said, hang on, where have you done? Where have our bikes gone? We like them. And so now the manufacturers are bringing them back again in a slightly different guise, which brings us to this, Yamaha's new R9, a middleweight sports bike designed to be a track bike, but also fun to ride on the road. Didn't we stop riding this stuff because this stuff did all the normal riding better? At which point, where does that leave the R9? Where does that leave middleweight sports bikes? I know there's more coming out, but is there any actual point to having one and riding it on the road these days?
It's easy to dismiss sports bikes as just not practical, but let's not forget motorbikes aren't that practical. Other than cutting through traffic, there are far more practical modes of transport. I'm not saying you should suffer on your riding, I'm not saying every ride should be uncomfortable, but don't write sports bikes off because they are just a bit special. There's something about being in this riding position on a fully fared bike that just makes the ride that bit more exciting, gives you that little bit of an extra buzz. Yeah, I've ridden all sorts of bikes. I've ridden 200 horsepower naked bikes, adventure bikes, customs, supermotors, and I'm a huge fan of motorbikes. It's no secret, but every time I get back on a sports bike, I remember why I love them so much. I irritate myself with how much I talk myself into other bikes, so I know how it is for everyone out there who's got to go and make a choice and buy a motorcycle, and to choose to buy the one that's less comfortable, less practical, can't take luggage, not so much use for a long distance tour. It's hard to make that shout, it's hard to make that call, but if you do, the rewards are such a special experience when you ride it. And in the right conditions, when the weather's good, the road's good, there's not too much traffic and you're in the right mood, there's nothing that beats the feeling of charging along on a sports bike. It feels amazing, and I think that is actually worth the downsides. It's worth your wrists hitting the tank when you turn the handlebars. It's worth having to ride with your arm on the tank to keep the weight off your wrists when you're cruising at 30 limit. It just feels special and exciting, and it's definitely a bigger adrenaline rush than most other types of motorcycles. Supermotos might have a case here, but there's a lot said about these middleweight bikes, and a lot of testing and talk has been done on track use and how they are around a racetrack, and and that is interesting, and it is kind of important because some people will buy them just to do track days on. And this R9 is a fantastic little track bike. I rode it at the launch on track, and to be honest, that's all I wanted to do this week, was book it in on another track day and go and thrash the pants off of it around Castle Combe, doing big backy skids to all the chicanes. And I will get to that later in the year, but I'm actually really glad I've brought this out and done a road ride, because I'm in this beautiful road in the Brecon Beacons and it just feels exciting. This thing's been sat in my garage for a couple of days while I've had to do other work, and I've been staring at it longingly, looking forward to a day like this with good sunny weather, quiet roads apart from the sheep, and it has not disappointed. I have enjoyed every second of it. Sports bikes are special. They're not practical, they're not the most useful bikes on the road, but sod being practical. I want something that makes my heart flutter a bit, and this thing definitely does it.
Sports bikes are a hard sell. Let's face it, they're not that comfy, they don't have amazing tank ranges, they're torturous if you're a pillion passenger, and they're not that great for strapping luggage to. It's quite hard to justify, especially if you're a one bike household. Everyone wants to be a 30 bike household, but if you're a one bike household, that bike has got to do everything. And unless you live at the far end of Brands Hatch to where you work, it's quite hard to justify buying and riding something that was built to go on racetracks. But it runs deeper than that, because motorbikes are supposed to make you feel a bit fizzy. Because if we're just going on practicalities, someone invented these things called cars that are dry and warm and comfortable and have Bluetooth things and heated things, and a way nicer way to transport yourself around the place, unless you live in a busy city, obviously. But motorbikes are there because we get excited about them. We love them. We want to go in the garage and just peek at them. We want to go and take photos of them and put them in beautiful places and ride them to the cafe for no reason other to sit drinking a tea or a coffee going, that's my bike, that is. I like that. And sports bikes do that, I think, better than 90% of motorcycles on the road. Because, especially if you're like me, they have so many connotations wrapped up in them. They're a little bit MotoGP or World Superbike inspired. There's this racing feeling to them. There's the thought of going out and riding track days. There's the promise of hunting down that perfect A-road and getting every corner nailed and driving off the apex hard. On a road like that, you can be flicking yourself side to side, hanging off of it, or you can just be sat on top of it. It just gives you more pizzazz about everyday riding situations. And for me, that's worth putting up with cramped wrists and achy knees and the fact that you probably end up riding with a backpack because the luggage racks always fall off of them. I think sports bikes give us a bit more of a buzz, and if motorcycling is one thing, it's supposed to be a buzz. It's supposed to be something that gives you a big smile when everything else in your life is falling to pieces, when you're pissed off with work, when you just need a release. Jumping on a motorbike and heading out to your favourite road is the perfect remedy for me, and I think a load of other people out there. A sports bike just does that extra little bit more to make it feel special. That's why I think even now sports bikes are definitely still relevant. Now the R9 in particular is the bike we've used to do this video on, and I think it's a perfect encapsulation of, oh, I don't like that word, that's a big long word. It's a perfect example of what we need right now, because with the R9 and its competitors, but particularly this bike, they've brought that sports bike vibe back down to earth. It doesn't have gas-charged Wi-Fi front suspension forks and a rear shock that actually came off of one of NASA's space shuttles as has been developed for MotoGP use. It's got good suspension, but they haven't thrown the kitchen sink at it in terms of technology, which means it's an affordable price, which means actually more people can get on it and get that same sports bike buzz. That's what sports bikes were when they first started. 80s, 90s, you can argue about which one it was, but that affordable, every rider's dream to be able to get on something that looks like what's racing on the track and ride it kind of in the same way. These days we have to do that on track days and be a bit more sedate on the road, but I think the R9's brought it home back to where it should be. Bikes that we can afford, that are an absolute riot to ride. Now, in trying to make the R9 more accessible, Yamaha has made it a little bit softer. They've given the engine a little bit more gentle characteristics than an out-and-out super sport bike might be. But that hasn't spoiled it on track. When I rode it on the launch, all I could think of was how good the front end felt, how much fun I was having chasing that next apex, trying to get more lean angle, trying to get my elbow down, trying to do more backy skids. It's not really lost too much as a legitimate sports bike. Now, there are people out there with fully track prepared R1s that would argue against that, but as a bike to get on a track day and have an absolute riot, you've not really given anything away with this new R9. And what you've gained is a bike that now begs you to go a bit quicker on the road, enjoys being taken down a bit of an alternative B-road route with some jumps and bumps in it. It's a bike that still works on the road, but still makes you feel special. I think Yamaha has hit the nail very sweetly on the head with this. And for all that, I'm going to forgive them the fact that when I turn the steering, my wrist jams into the fuel tank. That's like a proper throwback to 90s sports bikes. I'll also forgive them the fact that the side stand looks like it came off a cheap Chinese bike, mainly because the clutch lever is so pretty. And these are the weird, stupid details that I care about, possibly no one else. I think Yamaha's done a really good job of the R9, and there'll be plenty of people lamenting the, oh, why hasn't it got more power? Why hasn't it got X, Y, Z? But in reality, go and ride one, because this thing is an absolute hoot. They've brought sports bikes back to all of us, back to those of us who can't afford a 20 grand track bike, back to those of us who can't spend 3 weeks in Spain in the winter. This thing is much more relevant as a sports bike than 90% of the litre sports bikes out there, and I love it. Thank you, Yamaha. Motorbikes are awesome.